Welcome. Today we're going to be cooking beef ribs on our offset smoker using cherry wood and apple wood for flavour. So the fire's just getting started, so let's get into it.
Beef ribs taste great with just some salt, pepper, garlic and some good smoke. But if you want to try something a little bit more adventurous, then you can't go wrong with this smoky red wine braised approach that we're going to go through in today's video. My first step is always to plan out a rough timeline for my cook. I'm using the Slow BBQ app for a timeline and to set some alarms. I want to serve my ribs at about 6 PM, so I enter that time into the app for my rough timeline. I say rough as the steps for the braising process are a little bit different to those than straight up beef ribs. The app's getting a major update currently and will incorporate this recipe and many others, so keep an eye out on the app store for that. So our first step's going to be to get our meat out and give it a trim. You're going to need a sharp knife, a dry rub. I'm using my own bovine university mix, which I will add to the app soon, and some Worcester sauce, which is essentially just used to help bind the rub. So first step, we'll get this all trimmed up nicely and just remove some of the kind of bigger clumps of fat on this. As you can see here at the front of this is quite a large kind of decal, but we'll get rid of that and we'll just trim up some of the kind of loose, kind of flappier sections that are going to stop the rub and the smoke from kind of really getting to the meat. So we'll just trim this up nicely and just kind of get rid of any of the kind of larger lumps on there. We'll leave some fat on there, but ideally just kind of a little bit. We don't want to kind of have it so trimmed that we can see all of the meat, but at the same time we don't want huge layers of fat which are not going to render down when we kind of get up to the ideal smoking temperature and it's been in the smoke for a long period of time. But enough there that we've still got some kind of fat for flavour. And this is backyard cooking, so we're not doing competition stuff, so this isn't going to look real pretty, but it'll be good enough for our purpose. So the ribs all trimmed up nicely, we're ready to apply our rub. The cat's been eyeing this up for a little while, so it's best we do this now before he gets his greedy paws on it. So I'm starting off the dry rub stage by applying some Worcester sauce, or as our friends across the pond call it, Worcestershire sauce. And then we apply our dry rub. Now for this, the dry rub's a little bit more complex than I would normally use on beef. Generally with beef I keep it pretty simple: salt, pepper, garlic, maybe a little bit of onion powder, maybe a little bit of something spicy. But for this cook, as we're going to be braising this, I want to get a nice spark on this as early as possible. So I've added a bunch of sugar into this mix as well, and some other ingredients that I think will complement the braising quite nicely. So some chipotle, some cumin, some oregano, and some onion powder as well. And as I mentioned, this recipe will be available in the Slow BBQ app in the near future, so keep an eye out for that. So we've given our ribs a nice even coating of our rub. And what we're looking for on this is to do both sides and a little bit on the ends as well. The meaty side is obviously the side that's going to absorb the most of the rub, but we want to cover both sides as well. It gives it a nice appearance and also does help to penetrate the meat a little bit as well. And I'm just going to let these rest for a little while at room temperature while the smoker gets up to temperature. And we'll cook these slightly hotter than we would do normally for low and slow. So around about 275. We want to get a nice crust on these, get a nice bark set early on before we go into that braising process. So probably around about 4 hours, but we'll keep checking back to see how the bark's setting before we go into the braise process. So the beef ribs have been in now for a few hours, so let's take a look and see how they're getting on. Starting to see a bit of a bark forming on here, but not as much as I'd like. So we'll leave these in here for a little while and we'll keep checking back.
2 hours later.
Okay, so we've actually got a really good bark set on these already. The internal temperature's pretty high. We've already powered through the stall, which is normally at about 165. So we're going to go ahead and start making our braise and get these bad boys wrapped up. So for our braise, we're going to need 1 onion, 2 cloves of garlic, chopped up, 1 green bell pepper chopped up. And we're going to fry those up before we add to the other braise ingredients. 1 cup of red wine. About 2/3 of a cup of barbecue sauce. And 1 cup of beef stock. So we're now ready to fry up our onions, peppers and garlic. One of the beauties of cooking with a stick burner is that we can use the firebox as either a sauce warmer or, in this instance, to fry up our ingredients. I'm going to add a small amount of olive oil to a pan and then add in our chopped up onions, peppers and garlic. We'll give these a few minutes on here, maybe like 3 to 5 minutes, just enough time to begin to soften down and get a little bit fragrant. We don't want to get these dry or kind of beginning to char up or anything. We just want to get them softened up a little bit. Once we've done that, we'll add in our sauce mixture, which was the red wine, barbecue sauce and beef stock. Again, with this, we're just going to simmer this on here. This isn't hot enough to get this to boil or anything. We just want to warm this up essentially, just so that we're not chucking cold liquid all over our nice warm beef. Once we've got our braise done, we'll take our ribs off the smoker and get that braise on them before wrapping them up. With our ribs off the smoker, I've now put these in a pan and I'm going to apply the braise. Now, looking back on this, it probably wasn't the best idea to tip this liquid all over the top of that nicely set bark. We worked really hard to get that set and now I've kind of taken a little bit off. It did actually recover quite well, but thinking about it next time, I would probably just put it in the bottom and maybe spoon a little bit over the top every now and again. But hey, you learn something every cook, right? So now we're going to add the foil. Essentially, we're just kind of loosely tenting this over the top. We don't really want to do it too tight. The bark's already moist from that braise, so we don't want to kind of interfere with that anymore. So just going to wrap this round, just fold it over the edges of the pan and then put it back in the smoker just to finish off. And we're shooting for an internal temperature of between about 195 and 205 Fahrenheit. Okay, so the ribs have been back in the smoker for another couple of hours, so it's time to check on these again. They're looking pretty good. There's a lot of pullback on those bones. The bark's set quite nicely in there. So we're getting close to done. So we want to check the temperature and see where we're at. And the probe hasn't gone in too smooth. So there's still a little bit of time on here. We're at 193, so these can go back in. Okay, so they've been back in for another 45 minutes. And it's time to check them again. So again, everything's looking good on there. Just going to see how well this probe goes in and what the internal temperature is. The probe's going in nice and smooth now. There's very little resistance on there. Checking that. We're at 196. Getting closer to 197. And given that this probe's going in so smoothly, I'm going to call these done. So I'm going to pull these off now and just wrap them up and let them rest for about an hour or so. While we sort out the gravy. So we'll take the ribs out of the pan, keeping the gravy in the bottom with all of the peppers and all of that good stuff still left in there. So we'll put the ribs into some foil, we'll wrap the foil, we'll put a few towels around the top and we'll probably put them in a cool box and just leave it to rest for around about an hour. And that just kind of helps to keep some of those juices and some of the moisture in the meat while it's resting. So now we're going to make a gravy out of that awesome smoky meaty braise that we had left over. We're essentially just going to sieve out the onions and the peppers, warm it up and add a little bit of corn flour or flour just to thicken it up, and this will taste amazing. So all that's remaining for us to do now is to slice these up and eat them. I'm really happy of how these ribs turned out. They look and smell amazing. And while I love straight up beef ribs, just salt, pepper, garlic, turn out amazing ribs. These have got to be my new favourite. The red wine, beef stock, barbecue sauce, peppers and onion have given this a really nice flavour profile, and the smell is just amazing. So we'll slice these up now And even though these bones are absolutely massive, I still managed to catch one on the way down. So I'm not going to win Butcher of the Year, but as you can see, these ribs turned out pretty damn sweet. I served these with some pulled pork, some triple smoked potatoes, and that amazing gravy that we made earlier as well. So give these a shot. Let me know what you think. Please like and subscribe. It helps me know that people are actually watching this and getting something out of it. And we'll keep making videos as long as people are watching. So thanks. See you in the next one.